When you hear your average terminally online person talk about Rugrats, you'll hear either one of these things. That show was boring and mediocre. That show used to be good before it returned after its initial revival. The show jumped the shark after Dill arrived in the picture. All Grown Up was better. It was the cash cow before SpongeBob. The reboot sucks, or it was a fad that left little to no cultural impact. A while ago, I was forwarded a few tweets from my friend, and as a longtime fan of the show, I couldn't help but feel irritated because I know much of these facts aren't true. I feel like we're at a crossroads where, because of recent developments regarding the franchise and general 90s nostalgia burnout, that has distorted how people see the show and its legacy going forward. And unfortunately, it can be hard-pressed to not understand why if you're not a fan of the show like I am. I feel like what's gotten lost along the way is how much of a game-changer Rugrats really was, and why. So I'm here to give you the rundown. In the 80s, Nickelodeon was a relatively newbie network, struggling at first to stay stable. It lacked successful shows, stagnating viewership, and finishing at the less than the finish line in regards to US cable channels. After firing its management, Bob Pittman, president of MTV Networks, turned to Alan Goodman and Fred Siebert, who had created MTV's channel ideas many years earlier, to reinvigorate Nickelodeon, which involved creating the iconic bumpers and promos the network would become most famous for. In the late 80s, Nickelodeon decided they wanted to explore animation. They would try experimenting by poaching up Ralph Bakshi to make a pilot for the network named Junktown, based on a comic strip idea he had back in high school. The series was initially going to be picked up in 1989 for 39 episodes, but after a controversy involving an episode from his other series, Mighty Mouse and the New Adventures, the project was abandoned. In 1989, Vanessa Coffey, an independent producer, arrived at Nickelodeon after majoring in art and development at Marvel. She went to LA for 2 weeks in late 1988 and put out the word to animators that she was looking for ideas and concepts. She just wanted drawings, not a big pitch. The first pitch was Doug, the second pitch was Rugrats, and the third pitch being Ren and Stimpy. She approached animators Alan Klasky and Gabor Chupo, whose company Klasky Chupo was doing The Simpsons at the time. Gabor happened to have left The Simpsons at that point, and they told him, "We love your work, and we would love you to please create some inventive children's show for us." Gabor then went home to Arlene, who he was married to at the time, and told her that he needed to come up with something quick. People were pointing to The Simpsons and telling them, "Do something like this, but for children. Something different, something inventive, something daring, not your regular Saturday morning cartoons, which everybody knew for 30 years. And Arlene looked at hers and Gabor's kids and said, "Let's do a show about babies." Gabor had made an animated film based on one of their sons, where a man was holding a baby and the baby would drop the model and say, "Down." Then the man would put the baby down and then the baby would say, "Up," and then it went back and forth. That film stuck in her mind, and she continued thinking, why was the baby doing that? She went up to producer Paul Germain to ask him to flesh their concept out. So that night, Paul went to bed thinking about babies and what they could do with them. And as he was falling asleep, he had this memory of being 8 years old and his youngest brother had come home from the hospital. He remembered looking at him. His eyes weren't focused. He couldn't lift his head. He thought, he can't be that stupid. I bet he's faking this out. He went into the pitch with Vanessa and he's pitching all these ideas that he developed over the last 3 months. Gabor had hired him to be director of development for Klasky Chupo, and during the summer of 1989, he had his ideas lined up. Vanessa didn't take to most of his pitches, but one of them was okay. A bunch of incognizant babies seemed really dumb, but when adults leave the room, the babies suddenly get up and talk. She loved it. Even though Vanessa had a segment in the Thanksgiving special that was life from a baby's point of view during Thanksgiving, there was nothing written, no drawings, but she said, "Good, let's develop it together." Paul had a friend who told him in the Navy that people referred to kids as Rugrats, and he thought that sounded like a great title. Nickelodeon was nervous because they thought it was a show about talking rats. Paul set out to create something in the vein of Taxi, which was created by his former mentor, James L. Brooks. He wanted to make a smart show for smart kids. Initially, the show was a modest success, but it was overshadowed by Ren and Stimpy, which was the original breakout Nicktoon hit. But as we all know, that would crash and burn, and its popularity plateaued. On the surface, a show about babies would seem saccharine and off-putting, which is probably why the show, while popular, didn't see immediate success. But when the show initially wrapped production following its first 65 half-hour run, Nickelodeon put the show on prime time and it caught on like wildfire. Both adults and kids would watch Rugrats religiously, driving the show to become Nickelodeon's #1 show and the highest rated show on cable. In 1995, it surpassed reruns of Seinfeld and Frasier to become the most watched show with adults between the ages of 18 to 31. This can be attributed to the fact that Paul and his writers utilized the Peanuts-style storytelling concept and 70s Burt Reynolds-style script writing, which Paul admitted would both inspire him and the writers growing up, and they would apply to the subsequent shows that they would write on. Each of the babies would represent either us or someone we know or have known at one point in our lives. Tommy represented the brave everyman leader, someone who would assure us everything was okay and inspire us to brace our fears. Chucky would represent those with anxiety, someone who's submissive and reticent and the voice of reason in our heads that tells no. Philomena would represent the immaturity in all of us. Angelica has become a more divisive character in recent years, as many people paint her out to be an uncaring sociopath who picks on the babies for her own amusement, and whose behavior seems to be left up as cute. A common misconception is that she always goes unpunished, leading to unfavorable comparisons with other cartoon brands. Angelica was one of the first female characters in a cartoon to be really assertive, stand her ground, and tell it like it is, which at the time actually seemed quite empowering because back in the 80s, female characters were reduced to being submissive or overly feminine in makeup. This predates characters like Helga, Buttercup, Gas, or even Candace. Paul had once remarked that he felt that she was an inspiration to the millennial generation. Contrary to what many people think, the writers don't hold her up to be a role model at all. The idea to create a girl bully was based on the fact that Paul had a girl bully himself, and the origins of Angelica's personality arose from a little girl that Joan Silverhair and Steve Vixen knew. This is a topic for another day, but she works like an almost parody of a spoiled brat. Her ego, her delusions that she's talented at near everything, and belief that she has a great singing voice are all the basis of humor. And she's usually called out for it by the other characters, or it's outshined by Susie. She represents that older sister figure in your life, who's bossy and will tease you a little bit, but she looks out for you and will defend you when other people are giving you a hard time. And come on guys, she's the Sharpay Evans of the 90s. Her sassy one-liners, her iconic fashion style, her confidence, whereas the Angelica wasn't the villain theories. The writers would cover topics based on either what happened to them in their own lives or what happened with their kids, such as the slide being based on the fear Joan Silverhair's daughter had going down the slide, Chucky thinking there's monsters living underneath his new bed, the babies making home movies about their lives, Tommy wanting the inflatable clown bag that he got from Chucky, or Chucky conquering his fears about using the potty in Chucky vs. the Potty. If you've heard anyone talk about the parents on the show, the first thing you'll hear is people talk about how neglectful they are, whether laughing about it or seriously taking that as an issue with the show. Neglectful parenting is nothing new, since it has been covered before by The Simpsons and subsequently with other animated shows that have come out after them. But what people seem to miss is that underneath the parental neglect humor is the reason the parents reverberated is because they were young 30-somethings trying to figure parenting out. It felt like actual people with their own quirks and flaws. Stu was a stay-at-home dad who invented toys for a living and wanted to do his best to provide for Tommy and Dee Dee, even if he seemed misguided. Dee Dee was a perfectionist mother who highly relied on child psychologists on how to teach her to raise her kids, but ultimately cared for Tommy's well-being. Lou was a cranky World War II vet, disillusioned with the world around him with an obsession with the number 15. Drew was an accountant and the voice of reason to Stu's childish shenanigans, and Charlotte was an organized CEO and a staunch feminist. Many people characterize her as the bad mom of the show, and there is merit to that, since she spends more time on the phone than looking after Angelica, and that's one of the catalysts behind her behavior. But there is a duality. When Angelica was born, she said she was going to be back at the office the next day, and instead spend time with a newborn daughter. But we also get scenes that show that she's capable of disciplining Angelica, sometimes to a fault, coupled with the scene where Charlotte says that if Angelica's going to work in a male-powered structure, she needs to eat, breathe, and sweat self-esteem. She doesn't always make the best parenting decisions, but she does love Angelica and tries to do right by her. The show was also defined by the signature Kleski-Chupo style, noted for its surrealist, dreamlike quality. Rooted in the origins of the art styles used in Gabor Chupo's home country, Hungary, the style was used to stress that Rugrats wasn't your typical cutesy Saturday morning cartoon, and to illustrate the depiction of how children see the world, giving us some of the show's most iconic animated sequences that the show would be defined by. While Ren and Stimpy would go on to influence most of the cartoons in the 90s, it can't be ignored that Rugrats was a major player in establishing most 90s cartoons having a grungy, ugly but cute style, and similar to the show breaking the status quo, much of what the show established on an artistic level would go on to have much of its influence scattered in much of the 2010s cartoons. Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch is a fan of Rugrats, having drawn some doodles on Twitter that openly stated that he watched it growing up, and some of the more crazy animation sequences in the show are partially reminiscent of those found in Rugrats. Steven Universe would use fluid lumpy forms as the basis of its character designs and geometric abstraction, as well as employ a similar use of arbitrary colors. That's not to say that the influence to Rugrats is definitely traced, but you can't deny that it has had some kind of impact. Mutant Mayhem director Jeff Rowe has cited Rugrats as an inspiration for Mutant Mayhem's art direction, praising Tommy's character design in particular. One thing that has been the center of discussion for the last 7 years is Arlene Kleski and Paul Germain's falling out. I've known about this story for years, but it didn't get wide coverage until Sabersbot covered it. I've taken issue to his video since some facts he got wrong. That, of course, insisting that it was taken to court and was the reason the original series stopped being popular. They were put by the network not to discuss it publicly, though Paul and Joe have talked about it on the Lookback machine. They never had a court settlement, and the series would chug along in popularity, and that would only grow following the series' initial revival, only winding down by the mid-2000s when Nick was pushing All Grown Up as the Next Generation series. Arlene and Paul had a couple of meetings in 2018, which took place at the former Kleski-Chupo studio, discussing and working out their issues, including a discussion that took 4 hours. In passing, Paul told Arlene that he didn't have any Rugrats cells, and Arlene said that he could have some. Around this time, Arlene and Gabor's son, Jarrett, had passed away, and Paul had consoled Arlene. Then Arlene and Paul came to a line and suggested the three bury a hatchet, which they did. Paul was even in talks to run the reboot, according to Denis and Hannigan. But when Brian Robbins came to Nickelodeon and hired Ramsey Nato to become the executive vice president, she hired Eric Casimiro and Kate Boutillia, who had worked on the latest seasons of the original Rugrats to run the reboot instead. Though some Germain-era veterans like Rachel Lippman and Peter Gaffney would work on it. Rugrats was also revolutionary in its approach to celebrating diverse holidays that were often overlooked in children's programming, such as Passover, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa. By exploring these traditions, the series not only introduced young audiences to different cultural narratives, but also fostered inclusion and representation in animated media. Notably, Rugrats had a Passover episode called A Rugrats Passover in 1995, which actually beat a similar storyline in Seinfeld to air, setting a precedent for how children's programming could tackle significant cultural topics. The episode became Nickelodeon's highest-rated airing at the time, earning a 3.1 Nielsen rating and garnering acclaim for its sensitivity and authenticity, even receiving overwhelmingly positive reviews from Jewish community publications and nominations for a Primetime Emmy Award, an Annie Award, and a Cable Ace Award. Similarly, the Kwanzaa episode, though aired after The Proud Family and As Told by Ginger, was groundbreaking in its portrayal of this important cultural holiday, helping to raise awareness and appreciation of Kwanzaa among its youthful viewers. It played a crucial role in normalizing and celebrating African American heritage. And in subsequent years, it received renewed praise during Rugrats' 2010's resurgence period, highlighting its lasting impact and relevance in discussions about diversity in children's entertainment. Rugrats marked the beginning of a creative lineage that has influenced generations of viewers and creators alike. Craig Bartlett, who forged a fruitful friendship with Mary Harrington during his tenure on Rugrats, went on to develop the beloved series Hey Arnold, poignant exploration of urban childhood that blossomed from his own childhood experiences growing up in Seattle. Rachel Lippman further expanded her reach in the animation landscape, contributing her talents to the first season of Hey Arnold and later freelancing for Daria and serving as an executive producer for the hit Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Peter Gaffney channeled his creativity into co-creating Our Real Monsters with Gabor Chupo and writing for other classics such as Daria, Beavis and Butthead, and Recess. Meanwhile, Paul Germain and fellow writer Joel Solbacher collaborated to co-create Beethoven the animated series, Recess, and Lloyd in Space. Michael Farris extended his influence to projects like The Simpsons and the movies The Game, The Hunter's Player, Surrogates, and Terminator 3, while Eric Casimiro and Kate Boutillier took their creative ventures further, co-creating The Mr. Men Show. The essence of Rugrats continued to inspire newer works. For instance, Craig of the Creek drew on the spirit of Recess, sharing a similar ethos of childhood exploration and friendship. The arrival of Dylan and Kimmy in Rugrats elicited a wave of criticism from fans who felt the beloved series had jumped the shark, sentiment particularly understandable in Dill's case, as his limited ability to speak and his baby-like demeanor often seemed to clash with the show's adventurous spirit. While it is not uncommon for a long-running series to introduce new characters as a mere gimmick to revive interest or boost popularity, the Rugrats navigated this transition with a refreshing sense of realism and a drive to push the story further rather than introducing any gimmicks to keep the audience interested. After all, families routinely expand with the arrival of new siblings, and this narrative choice played a crucial role in Tommy's evolution into a more responsible big brother. As a child, I was blissfully unaware of the criticisms surrounding the show. What I saw was an innovative departure from the status quo, an expansion of family dynamics that, to my young eyes, was unprecedented in animation. This progression not only made the series resonate with countless families who could see their own experiences reflected in the stories, but it also provided representation for many Asian girls through Kimmy's whose vibrant presence and relationship with Chucky encouraged him to emerge from his shell. The depiction of adopted step-siblings fostering a healthy sibling relationship was a groundbreaking move in animation, and as controversial as this may sound, this very element contributed to the enduring affection for Rugrats, distinguishing it from a mere footnote in the history of Nickelodeon. Had the series concluded after season 3, while it would still be fondly remembered, it likely would remain just another Nick 2, rather than a pivotal piece of animated legacy that continued to echo through the hearts of audiences. The series boasted a remarkable roster of celebrity fans, including Rosie O'Donnell, Billy Bob Thornton, Jon Favreau, Clint Eastwood, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Nicholson, Jane Seymour, the late Aaron Carter, Ray Romano, Ariana Grande, the late Larry King, O'Shea Jackson Jr., Carl Penn, and of course Bruce Willis. Interestingly, Klasky Chupo didn't cast Bruce Willis to voice Spike in Rugrats Gone Wild solely because they saw a high-profile celebrity guest. Rather, Bruce and his family are genuine fans of the show. Demi Moore once mentioned in an interview that she collects dolls, and she even has a Dill Pickles doll on her carry-on bag. Tallulah Willis shared a nostalgic photo of a birthday party from the early 2000s, where she dressed up as Dee Dee and her sibling as Kimmy. She recounted that they enjoyed juicing baby bottles and mashed brownies with gummy worms, an experience she described as the most meaningful birthday celebration she ever had, one that set the tone for the next 20 years of birthdays. Tallulah also expressed how she wishes she had known sooner about the incredible magic of lighting, when parents allow themselves to be as whimsical as her own, and she hopes to share those precious moments with her children when the time comes. Upon its theatrical release on November the 8th, 1998, the Rugrats movie became the first non-Disney film to surpass $100 million in worldwide box office revenue. Although it was not the inaugural film adapted from an animated television series, Beavis and Butthead had their first entry with Do America. It did initiate a notable trend of animated films derived from TV shows, a phenomenon that flourished from 1999 to 2004. The year 2001 was significant for Rugrats, marking its 10th anniversary with several noteworthy events. Nickelodeon celebrated by honoring the show with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Fans had the opportunity to customize their own Pepsi cans featuring Rugrats characters. From July 7th to July 20th, Nickelodeon distributed Rugrats shirts showcasing the characters as both babies and teenagers. Additionally, the network hosted a Rugrats marathon leading up to the Kids' Choice Awards, inviting viewers to select their 10 favorite episodes. At the beginning of the year, Burger King also joined in on the celebration by offering Rugrats toys. The 10th anniversary special All Grown Up garnered an impressive 11,913,000 viewers, making it Nickelodeon's highest-rated telecast to date. The series took a notable downturn following 2001, extending throughout the remainder of the 2000s. By 2002, All Grown Up had achieved such success that Nickelodeon commissioned Klasky Csupo to develop an entire series based on the special. Eric Casimiro, one of the writers, who initially pitched Preschool Days, was subsequently retooled after his departure from Klasky in 2002. Was hesitant to further develop this project, perceiving it as reminiscent of Pebbles and Bam Bam growing up. With the rise of SpongeBob SquarePants, the latter in many ways overshadowed this series. This is understandable as SpongeBob was fresh, humorous, quotable, charming, and unlike anything previously seen. Nonetheless, it was somewhat unfortunate that this earlier giant of the industry was somewhat overshadowed, despite having paved the way for shows like SpongeBob to emerge and gain prominence. The relationship between Nickelodeon and Klasky Csupo experienced strain as the mid-2000s approached. The 5-year contractual agreement was nearing its expiration, and Klasky Csupo saw a profit-sharing arrangement following the success of their shows on Nickelodeon and Nicktoons, rather than accepting the industry-standard upfront payment. Furthermore, the pendulum of societal preferences often shifts in response to economic and political cycles. Historical patterns suggest that during periods of right-wing political shifts, war and economic despair, audiences gravitate towards comedic cartoons as a means of escapism. This trend was particularly evident in the 2000s when such shows flourished, presenting these themes in innovative ways. Many of the most popular cartoons of that decade were comedies. In contrast, Rugrats, which features a slice-of-life narrative with emotional and weighty elements, likely experienced a decline in popularity partly for this reason. This phenomenon is not limited to Rugrats. Similar trends affected The Simpsons and other slice-of-life shows in that era. As the 2010s unfolded, a remarkable and somewhat unexpected cultural shift took place. Following the 2008 election, society began to re-embrace multiculturalism, a trend reflected in popular media through shows like Modern Family and Glee, as well as the rise of openly pro-LGBT artists such as Lady Gaga. This leftward cultural movement also influenced entertainment, leading adults to openly enjoy cartoons beyond the traditional adult-oriented fare. This period saw the emergence of programs with ostensibly cute or simplistic premises that nonetheless resonated with a broad audience. A prime example of this phenomenon was My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, a reboot of a toy franchise originally designed to sell toys. Reimagined for a diverse audience of all ages, it gained a dedicated fan base capable of organizing its own conventions, demonstrating its cultural impact. As the 20th anniversary of Rugrats approached in 2010, Nickelodeon experimented with rekindling interest in the series. They had marathons of the show from around 2010 to 2011, often at early morning hours. And in March 2011, launched The 90s Are All That, a programming block dedicated to shows from the 1990s. Rugrats was added to this lineup in November 2011, which revitalized its popularity and reignited public interest. This resurgence was partly due to a societal shift where it was no longer frowned upon to enjoy shows with cute or simplistic concepts. Nostalgia played a significant role, as many viewers of that era found themselves longing for childhood memories. But I believe that this was more than just simple 90s nostalgia, something bigger. What's particularly noteworthy was its progressive approach. The show embraced multiculturalism, challenged gender norms, incorporated serialized storytelling, and featured the distinctive quirky art style infused with surreal elements. Not unlike most of the 2010s animated lexicon, Rugrats was pioneering these themes well before they became standard in children's programming at the time. Drawing from references in Workaholics, SNL, Jay Leno, Tosh.0, and Robot Chicken, as well as celebrities expressing their admiration for the show at the Kids' Choice Awards, and the flood of inescapable fan love on Tumblr and BuzzFeed articles discussing it. Suddenly, Rugrats was back on top of the cultural landscape. Though it never quite regained its status as the dominant force of the 1990s, it was undeniably emerging as something of a burgeoning powerhouse again, gaining strength throughout the decade despite not having a single crumb of new content. Nickelodeon tested the waters again by airing Rugrats in Paris at 8 p.m. on August 28, 2012, and for the second time on December 16, 2012 at 8 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. respectively. The film's impressive ratings led Nickelodeon to re-air Paris frequently in 2012 and in 2013 and 2014. One of these airings, including the movie, is part of a special Rugrats Super Bowl marathon broadcast on February 3rd, 2013. These airings continue frequently, up to 10 times throughout 2014. By 2015, an unprecedented development occurred. Following the long-awaited greenlighting of Hey Arnold the Jungle movie, Nickelodeon announced a new initiative to revitalize the classic properties a la Rugrats and Hey Arnold. This included the creation of miniseries and specials, as well as rebranding the 90s Are All That into The Splat. The excitement surrounding these efforts was immense, with Rugrats taking center stage in these celebrations. Characters from the series appeared as costumes at 90s Fest, and The Splat featured dedicated Rugrats marathons alongside a flurry of social media activity across Tumblr, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It appeared that the resurgence of Rugrats was in full swing. In 2016, Rugrats marked a significant anniversary, its 25th, experiencing the most heightened attention the franchise had received since 2001. Nickelodeon went all out in celebration, with notable appearances by Arlene Klasky, Gabor Chupo, and Paul Germain in interviews, marking their first public appearances since the early 2000s. The creators were featured in interviews with Entertainment Weekly, and Arlene and Paul participated in episodes of the Nick Animation Podcast, a limited edition series that highlighted Nicktoon creators. Arlene also attended several panels, including the Happy Happy Jolly Joy exhibition and the San Diego Comic-Con panel. Additionally, several cast members reunited for a special on the Splat Block, and Kith collaborated with Nickelodeon to produce Rugrats-themed hoodies. The event felt like a renaissance for the franchise. Speculation about a potential reboot circulated, with Arlene hinting that Nickelodeon executives had been in discussions with her and Gabor about reviving the series. She expressed hope that Paul Germain would be involved. When asked by Entertainment Weekly how they would approach a Rugrats reboot, Arlene suggested a preschool setting where the babies would learn to code, whereas Paul favored a soft reboot set in the 90s, taking place after season 3. By 2017, Nickelodeon capitalized on Rugrats' researchers by launching plush toys, releasing an official retail DVD collection of at least the first 4 seasons, and introducing new apparel. FYE stores offered exclusive reptile bars, while a new series of comic books published by Boom Comics further revitalized the franchise. Meanwhile, negotiations for the revival persisted. Although Rugrats was no longer the dominant force it once was, and certainly not on the same level as SpongeBob, it had undeniably re-established itself as a significant presence in pop culture. The future appeared promising for the franchise. On July 17, 2018, the Rugrats Revival series was officially announced after years of negotiations, accompanied by news of a CG/live-action movie. While the announcement of the movie initially caused some unease among fans, reactions to the Revival series itself were mixed, predictably divided. Nonetheless, a significant portion of the fanbase celebrated the news collectively, with outlets like BuzzFeed and Romper enthusiastically hyping it up. The eye-catcher was that Paul Germain seemed to be involved, and his statements on Tumblr and Facebook appeared to support that. Rugrats had overcome the ship-has-sailed allegations, and it was finally receiving new content. Nickelodeon even released a few new Rugrats books in late 2018 and early 2019 to bolster the revival. Things could only go up from here, or so it seemed. Several key events occurred that significantly altered the trajectory of things, and though they weren't directly the fault of the Rugrats franchise, they nonetheless impacted its image. By late 2018, the passing of Steven Hillenburg shocked the animation world. Hillenburg, a largely beloved creator, had left an indelible mark on SpongeBob SquarePants, and his death led to a renewed appreciation for the show. This reappreciation extended to the previously overlooked post-first movie era of SpongeBob. By contrast, Rugrats, which had long been overshadowed by SpongeBob, concluded its run in the mid-2000s and faded further into the background. Around this time, Saber Sparks' coverage of the behind-the-scenes history of Rugrats also sparked a reassessment of its legacy, prompting a shift in how people viewed the show. Complicating matters further was the arrival of Brian Robbins as Nickelodeon's new president in late 2018. Robbins, the director of Good Burger and co-creator of All That, ushered in a period of intense nostalgia-driven programming. By late 2019, this nostalgia push became more apparent as Robbins greenlit reboots of All That and Are You Afraid of the Dark, as well as multiple SpongeBob spin-offs. At the same time, production on Glitch Tex's second season was abruptly halted by the new regime despite being ordered a year ago and having completed scripts. Later that year, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was also cancelled. These decisions, made in the wake of a broader shift in the network's direction, coincided with a shift in public perception of Rugrats. As a result, fans' initial cautious optimism for a Rugrats reboot turned into a widespread sentiment of resistance, with many deeming the reboot as unnecessary, and some even refusing to engage with the new series altogether. In 2019, we saw a cultural shift similar to the one in the 2000s, as society began tilting to the right once again, a trend that would only accelerate in the years following the pandemic. During this time, edgier, more unconventional cartoons regained prominence, aligning with this broader societal movement. While exceptions like Bluey and King of the Hill remained popular, the dominant trend leaned towards more provocative content. In many ways, I believe Rugrats is often misunderstood. Critics who dismiss it typically label it as boring, bland, generic, or overly childish. However, many fans can quickly counter these criticisms, pointing to the show's depth, subversion of expectations, and its ability to appeal to a wide audience on multiple levels. The polarized reactions to the reboot, coupled with the manner in which it was marketed, did little to alleviate the situation. However, that is a discussion best reserved for another video. Although Zoomers were introduced to Rugrats through Nick Rewind, the lack of new content until 2021 contributed to its perception as outdated. However, shows should not be dismissed solely because of their age, as many possess timeless themes, cultural significance, and nostalgic value that continue to resonate with audiences today. Recognizing their enduring impact can foster appreciation for their artistry and the ways they shape entertainment across generations. Animated shows on streaming services often struggle to leave a lasting impression these days. The collapse of the streaming boom has led to many cartoons being cut short or overlooked due to lack of promotion. While this reboot hasn't been entirely immune to those challenges, the Rugrats franchise is in a different category. It can live on through perpetuity. The community may not be especially vocal on platforms like Twitter, but it's very much alive. If you visit the Rugrats subreddit, you'll find thoughtful discussions and a surprising amount of engagement. There are even YouTube video essays diving deep into the characters and themes. It's no coincidence that the franchise continues to inspire reboots, video games, and other media in the 2020s, including a live-action/CG film that for now is on hold. It might not have the same level of mainstream visibility as SpongeBob or even Avatar, but it's earned a great deal of respect over the years, and for good reason. From a visual and storytelling standpoint, it stands tall among the giants, and the characters are spearheading both from a visual and storytelling perspective. That said, it's understandable if the show doesn't resonate with everyone. Different viewers connect with different things, but to dismiss it as lesser simply because it doesn't center itself around rapid-fire humor or absurdist gags seems unfair. If you've watched reruns on The Splat or grew up watching reruns on Nickelodeon or Hulu, there's no excuse to downplay the impact this show had. There's real depth and charm worth acknowledging, far more than it often gets credit for. When it comes down to it, whether it's your favorite or not, there's room for different styles of storytelling and animation, and that variety is what keeps the medium vibrant.